As we just heard, President Obama and the Chinese leader Hu Jintao expressed their desire for a stronger political relationship. Yet the two countries are already linked economically, with the Chinese actually providing much of the money on which the U.S. government runs. That has implications not only for the U.S. economy, but also for American politics. Joining us for a closer look at the U.S.-China relationship are two of our regulars, Marcus Mabry, the international business editor of the New York Times, and Robin Farzad, a senior writer with Business Week. Good to see both of you again, and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as China becomes more important economically to the United States, is it also conceivable that it becomes more sort of influential politically on the day-to-day business of how the U.S. government is run?
I think we're a ways away from that reality. There's no question, though, that over time, as China holds at this point some estimated $2 trillion, largely in American assets, they have more and more power on the global scene. They are the emerging market. They are the competitor to the U.S. Soon they will overtake Japan as the second largest economy in the world. So there is a natural friction there between the United States, which is the world's largest debtor nation, and China, which is its largest creditor.
What about you, Robin? Do you think that the politics may end up influencing the Obama administration?
I do think it's a natural extension of the current relationship and almost inevitable. Marcus talks about the trillions of dollars that the Chinese are lending the United States, and they, like any other cold-eyed investor, are worried about the state of their investment. If inflation is in the offing in the United States, if we're watering down or debasing the dollar, their treasury securities are going to be worth less. So yes, naturally they're looking into how aggressive the price tag is going to be on healthcare reform, or even this week we're hearing mumblings about them looking into our Afghanistan policy. So this is what you do as a creditor. You look into the status of your borrower's creditworthiness.
So it's only natural then that they should be concerned about where their money is going?
Of course.
And the value of that money. I think what's going to be interesting to see, and I'd be really shocked, and it'll be a real measure of kind of the waning of American power globally, is if China actually starts to have a say or even influence, say what the United States decides to do on the ground in Afghanistan, how many troops go, how much money the United States is willing to spend of its own treasure and its own blood, to some extent, one would argue, in Afghanistan. If those kind of strategic decisions that affect national security directly start to be influenced by America's financial relationship to China, then that is, I think, the waning of American superpower.
Do you think this is something that could end up influencing decisions over Afghanistan?
Yes, indeed. China already has more than an imprimatur on U.S. policy vis-a-vis Iran or U.S. policy toward North Korea. You have to say that China is the chief obstacle, but potentially simultaneously the chief facilitator. For better or for worse, we have to go through China. China has that Security Council vote, and you know, the fact that this is happening in Afghanistan, albeit indirectly, inquiries made as to Washington's appropriations policy toward Afghanistan, is just a roundabout way of affecting U.S. foreign policy in a way that I think China already has outsized influence.
So just in terms of turning the corner back to the economics a little bit, we've been doing stories covering President Obama's trip, of course, to Asia. And one of the items that we ran yesterday looked at China's growing influence around the world. Basically, it's in Africa. There was a story about its influence in Israel, so on and so forth. Do you think that this is sort of overplayed a little bit, or are the fates of the United States and China so closely intertwined now?
Well, I would just argue, going back to our last point, that I think there's a difference between China's veto power that comes from its being a permanent member of the Security Council 5 and its economic power kind of influencing what happens around the world. I think eventually we will get to that point where it does more directly. To answer that last question, there is a Chinese threat that's often discussed in the halls of American power. I think it can be overstated. I think it's inevitable that when you have two great powers, one that is relatively on the decline, the United States, one which is relatively on the ascension, China, there are going to be points of friction throughout the world as America is challenged by China over and over again. Africa being the greatest example, you are going to see these areas in which there's going to be conflict. Hopefully it will always be resolved peacefully and politically.
But there are also issues of mistrust, aren't there, as well, whether it's Chinese intellectual property rights, issues around piracy, them keeping their currency devalued, depressed. How do we get around those issues of mistrust?
Well, the base question is, what one issue do you start on? What single pillar defines U.S.-China relations more than anything? It could be climate change right now, where the bona fides necessarily haven't been set. China doesn't want binding caps on carbon emissions. It could be foreign policy. It could be, well, the United States is going to spend its entire China capital wad on the Iran-North Korea issue. It could be the currency peg.
But there are
so where
also
do you
concerns
start?
that some would say that China doesn't play by the rules of the international system. So now how do you address that? I mean, that is a phenomenal question to kind of grapple with, isn't it?
It's incredibly difficult to address, and it's not going to get any easier because China is going to get only increasingly important and its footprint increasingly large. My partner and I are expecting kids soon, and we want a Mandarin-speaking nanny. Why? Because China will be the largest economy by the time our kids graduate high school. So there's not much wiggle room here, and I don't think we're going to find an answer anytime soon. China is too big to fail.
All right, Marcus Mabry, Robin Farzad, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.